Welcome back. So far we have been returning all the columns from the file, but you might not need all the columns and you may want to select only certain columns that are the benefits to this. Firstly, your development time will be quicker as you don't have to list all the hundreds of columns when you have a wide file. And secondly, and most importantly, it's more performant and cost-effective when you're processing a file with a column in a file format such as Parquet or Delta, because Synapse will only scan the columns specified and returns the results. So the amount of scans being carried out and the total size of data moved would be much smaller when you specify only certain columns rather than the full list of columns. Let's start with selecting a subset of columns from a taxes on file. Say, for example, I only want to select the borough and the zone in this case because the file has a header already. All I have to do is take out the other two fields, so it'll just work. So let's run this and see whether that works. And that's worked as expected. So we got the borough and the zones being listed. But when you are working on production level projects, most of the time your CSV files don't have a header. That's because in big data projects, most of the time the files are broken down into multiple files. So far, we haven't dealt with a file without a header. In order to give you that experience, I've set up a file which is again containing the taxes on data, but the header being remote. Let me show you which file I'm talking about. So let me go to the Data tab and let me expand the tab here. And I see Taxi Data Container. We got another file called Taxi Zone without header.csv. So let me preview that data and turn off the header. And as you can see, there are no headers here and the first record itself is the data record. So let's see how we deal with this file. Let me switch back to our script and let me take the SQL and then make the changes. Because this file doesn't have any headers. It doesn't make sense to specify that it's got a header because if they say the file has got a header, it'll consider the first record as the header, which is not what we want. And also, let's start with removing the right column for now and see what we get out of this. And then we'll add the big column to give the column names. So as you can see here, we got the data being returned, but the data has got C1, C2, C3 for us, the column names, and then you've got the data records listed here as well. We need to give it column names. So the one option is to specify the width class with the column name. So let's pick those here and then copy and paste it. And now I've got the fifth column, and then I can run this. And as you can see, we've got the column names being given. So we got the column names and then we got the data, which is brilliant. But the problem we were trying to solve is to specify a subset of columns. So I can specify a subset of columns. For example, if I wanted to just select the borough and the service zone, if I just specified those two, what's going to happen is it's going to assign the column name as borough for the first column and the zone as the second column, which is not correct because it goes on the column order because there are no column names on the header itself. So let me run that and show you. So I can say the borough being set to location idea and the zone being set to borough. That's not what we want. The right way to solve this problem is to use the ordinal positions. As we could see here, it's assigned to position 1 for borough. But we know that the borough is the second position in the data and the zone is our third position in the data. So if you specify those, then when you run it, it's going to give you the data in the right way. So we got the borough being set to the actual borough and the zone being set to the actual zone. This gives us more freedom. For example, if you wanted to select the data in a slightly different order, for example, if you wanted to get the zone being selected first, we can do that because we are not relying on the order of data. We are relying on our script, giving the instruction to pick the right columns from the ordinal positions and then give them names. So number 3, which is the column position number 3, is going to be zone and borough is going to be picked up from number 2. So if I run this, the result should be exactly the same, but the zone will come first. So you've got the zone and the borough. So that's how you specify ordinal positions and then select a subset of columns from a CSV file without a header. Now all of a sudden they've got more control over what columns we want to read, what order we want to read them in, and also, most importantly, what name we want to give them, which is really powerful because we can solve a lot of issues with this functionality. If you remember when we initially looked at the data, we misspelt one of the column names and the data wasn't returned. And also when we looked at the column names didn't follow any standards, and a few columns had type of case in them and the others had camel case. So with this feature, we can fix that issue. So let me quickly grab the select statement from that file and then I'll show you how to do that. So in this select statement, we misspelled one of the columns, which was location ID with a D is a lowercase d. But say we want to make it all consistent. And if I did location underscore it for this column and then borough with the lowercase b zone with the lowercase z, and then service zone stays as it is, what's going to happen is we are not going to get data for a few columns there. Because we got null. No, none of these columns exist. But we know now that actually we can specify the ordinal positions. So I can say ordinal position 1, 2, 3, and 4 here. And that should now bring back the data. The data returned as expected. So as you can see, we got the column names as we specified and the data is being returned as we expected as well. So what we're technically doing here is we're ignoring the header record in the file itself and we're specifying the column name ourselves. But the SQL itself is slightly misleading because it says there is a header law in the file and that's what we're using. So we should really remove that one. But if we remove that and run it, it's going to fail because the column names will now be treated as the data, records, and syntax will try and fit the same data types for those. For example, location ID will be treated as a small integer, which is not right. So it's going to fail. So instead, what you can do is you can ignore the first record and you can start from the next record. For that, you specify the option first row and then say 2. So what that says is my first data record starts from record number 2. So I'm ignoring the first one. So let's run this one. And the results are as we expected. So we got the column names as we specified here and the data records as well. And I want to say one more thing about the first row here. In this case, we have ignored the head record. But in a lot of cases, in production scenarios, you may have a blank line on the first one, or you may have their accounts or some kind of custom header records, and you may even have multiple records you want to ignore before looking at the proper data record. So that's bad. This option will be really handy. So if you want to have your data starting from a record number 4, you'll specify first row equals 4, so it'll ignore the first 3 and then start from the 4th record. So that's the end of this session, and I'll see you in the next one.